In the ancient kingdom of Tafinia, a powerful legend was born, a boy whose name would resonate through history, a name spoken both in reverence and fear. His journey from a prince to a warrior king is one of unparalleled courage, love, betrayal, and legacy. Ayorinde was the son of King Adadayor, a wise ruler who guided Tafinia through times of both prosperity and peril. As a boy, Ayorinde's world was shaped by conflict. The kingdom of Tafinia, though strong, was surrounded by rival nations eager to see its downfall. And so, Ayorinde grew up in an environment where strength was not an option. It was a necessity. From a young age, Ayorinde displayed an insatiable hunger for battle. While his siblings engaged in the softer arts of diplomacy and court life, Ayorinde sought out the warriors. His earliest memories were not of royal banquets or lavish court life, but of the clang of swords and the relentless grind of training. Every morning, as the sun rose over the kingdom, Ayorinde could be found in the training grounds, honing his skills, learning the ways of warfare. But even as he trained, his father ensured he learned the lessons of leadership. King Adadayor was wise, and though he saw his son's prowess in combat, he understood that ruling a kingdom required more than strength. Ayorinde was brought into council meetings, forced to observe the delicate balancing act of governance. Yet for Ayorinde, those chambers seemed distant and cold. His heart belonged to the battlefield. By the time he was 19, Ayorinde had grown into a formidable warrior. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that could pierce through to a man's soul, he carried an air of command wherever he went. And it was at this age that King Adadayor gave him his first true test, led an army to secure Tafinia's borders from the kingdom of Kurata. Kurata had long been a thorn in Tafinia's side. Its king was ruthless, its warriors fierce. But Ayorinde, despite his youth, accepted the challenge without hesitation. It was in this campaign that the young prince would prove himself, not just as a warrior, but as a leader. As he prepared for war, Ayorinde knew that brute force would not be enough to defeat Kurata. Their army was strong, perhaps stronger than Tafinia's. But Ayorinde had spent years studying strategy. He had read the ancient texts, learned from the greatest generals in history, and most importantly, he trusted his instincts. His plan was bold, too bold, some said. But Ayorinde had a vision. Instead of engaging Kurata in open battle, he relied on surprise. Night after night, Ayorinde's forces conducted raids, striking the enemy's camps when they least expected it. By dawn, his soldiers would vanish into the forests, leaving the Khoradan forces disoriented and exhausted. These tactics wore down the enemy's defenses until finally, Ayorinde launched his full assault. The battle was swift and decisive. Kurata's forces, weakened and scattered, were unable to withstand the full force of Ayorinde's army. In a matter of days, the once mighty kingdom of Kurata had fallen, its lands absorbed into Tafinia. Ayorinde returned home a hero, and his people celebrated him as the bringer of dawn. But with victory came new challenges. Ayorinde's rise to power did not go unnoticed. His name spread beyond Tafinia's borders, and with it the envy and fear of rival kingdoms. Yet it was not only enemies from afar that Ayorinde had to contend with. Within his own court, whispers of dissent began to grow. At the center of these murmurs was Olutayor, once Ayorinde's closest confidant. Olutayor had been at Ayorinde's side since childhood. They had fought together, strategized together, and celebrated together. But as Ayorinde's power grew, so did Olutayor's jealousy. He saw Ayorinde's conquests not as victories for Tafinia, but as steps toward a dangerous ambition. In private, Olutayor confided in the nobles, sharing his fears. He spoke of balance, of stability, warning that Ayorinde's constant warring would leave the kingdom vulnerable. But beneath these concerns lay something darker, a deep resentment of Ayorinde's success, a belief that Ayorinde's rise would overshadow his own place in history. Ayorinde, ever the warrior, was too focused on external threats to see the storm brewing within his own walls. His attention was drawn to the east, to the kingdom of Ubara, another powerful nation that threatened Tafinia's borders. Ayorinde led his forces into Ubara, confident that his strategies would once again bring victory. But this campaign would be unlike any other. Ubara was prepared. The king of Ubara, a seasoned ruler, had anticipated Ayorinde's movements. And when Ayorinde's forces moved into Ubaran territory, they were met with devastating ambushes. Supplies were mysteriously delayed. Routes that had once been clear were now treacherous. it became clear that someone within Tafinia had betrayed him. Ayorinde was no fool. He quickly realized that the betrayal had come from his inner circle. His suspicions fell on Olutayor, though there was little time to act. With his forces weakened, Ayorinde was forced to retreat, his campaign against Ubara faltering. For the first time in his life, Ayorinde faced the sting of defeat. He returned to Tafinia, not as a triumphant hero, but as a leader whose victory had been stolen from him by betrayal. Back in the capital, the atmosphere had shifted. Olutayor, emboldened by Ayorinde's temporary setback, had wasted no time sowing doubt among the nobles and the people. He whispered that Ayorinde's failure in Ubara was a sign of his recklessness, that his ambition had outgrown his wisdom. Olutayor painted a picture of a king who had lost his way, and slowly some began to believe him. But Ayorinde was not one to be easily broken. He confronted the court with the same ferocity he displayed on the battlefield. His presence was commanding, his words sharp, and though Olutayor and his conspirators continued to undermine him, Ayorinde's authority remained intact. For now, however, amidst this turmoil, a twist of fate brought an unexpected ally into Ayorinde's life, Christiana, the warrior princess of Ubara. She had been captured during the failed campaign, but rather than seeing her as a mere prisoner, Ayorinde saw something else. Christiana was no ordinary royal. She had led her own forces into battle, stood beside her father on the front lines. She understood the burden of command in ways that few others did. Their initial conversations were guarded, the tension of war still lingering between them. But over time, a mutual respect grew. Ayorinde admired Christiana's strength, her wisdom, and her courage. She in turn saw in Ayorinde not just a warrior, but a leader who, despite his hardships, remained unbroken. This respect soon blossomed into something deeper. The union of Ayorinde and Christiana was more than just a marriage. It was a powerful alliance. Their marriage brought peace between Tafinia and Ubara, two kingdoms that had been bitter enemies for generations. The people of Tafinia, once skeptical of their king's continued wars, now saw this union as a symbol of hope, of stability. For a time, it seemed that Ayorinde had secured his kingdom's future. With Christiana by his side, Tafinia entered a brief period of peace. Together, they ruled as equals, a partnership forged not only in love, but in the shared burden of leadership. Christiana's influence in the court tempered some of Ayorinde's harsher impulses, bringing a balance that had been missing. But peace, as always, was fleeting. Olutayor and his faction, seeing Ayorinde's strength renewed by his alliance with Ubara, grew more desperate. They saw Christiana as a foreign influence, a threat to their power, and they feared that together, Ayorinde and Christiana would make Tafinia untouchable. So they accelerated their plans to remove Ayorinde from the throne. The coup was swift and brutal. Olutayor had spent years building alliances within the court and beyond, quietly amassing power. One night, as Ayorinde and Christiana slept in the royal palace, the conspirators struck. Loyal soldiers were bribed, gates were opened, and before the dawn, the palace was in chaos. Civil war had come to Tafinia, but Ayorinde was no stranger to war. Though caught off guard, he rallied his loyal soldiers and fought back against the coup with the same fury that had brought him victory so many times before. Ayorinde, a warrior herself, stood by his side, leading their forces in defense of the palace. Together, they pushed back the traitors, but the cost was high. Tafinia was now on the brink, and worse news was yet to come. The kingdom of Karada, the very land Ayorinde had once conquered, had risen in rebellion. Word came that Karada's new leaders had taken advantage of the internal strife in Tafinia to break free from its control. The rebellion, combined with the internal coup, threatened to tear the kingdom apart. A lesser man might have fled, might have abandoned the throne to save his own life. But Ayorinde was no ordinary king. Even as the weight of betrayal and rebellion bore down on him, he refused to back down. In the fields just beyond Tafinia's capital, the final battle began. The traitors, emboldened by the rebellion, believed that Ayorinde was weakened. But Ayorinde, the bringer of dawn, fought as he always had, with every ounce of strength he possessed. The battlefield was a chaotic swirl of clashing swords, shouting soldiers, and the cries of the wounded. Ayorinde, as always, fought at the front, his sword flashing in the sunlight. His soldiers, inspired by their king's bravery, fought with renewed vigor. But the enemy was vast, and the weight of two battles, one against the internal traitors the other against the Koradan rebels, was too much, even for Ayorinde. As the battle raged, Ayorinde was struck down. He fell, not with a cry, but with the silent dignity of a king who had given everything for his kingdom. His soldiers, seeing their king fall, fought on with even greater ferocity, but the loss was too great. Ayorinde, the warrior king, the legend, was dead. His death sent shockwaves through the kingdom. For a moment, it seemed that all was lost. But Ayorinde's legacy was not so easily erased. Christiana, his queen, took up his mantle. She rallied the remaining loyalists and, with the strength and wisdom Ayorinde had always admired in her, crushed the rebellion. The traitors were brought to justice, and the Koradan rebels were forced back into submission. Under Christiana's leadership, Tafinia slowly regained its stability. She ruled with the same strength Ayorinde had, ensuring that his legacy lived on. Though his body was gone, Ayorinde's spirit remained, a symbol of bravery, resilience, and unbreakable will. Ayorinde's life teaches us many lessons. He showed that true leadership is not only about strength on the battlefield, but about resilience in the face of betrayal. Even when those closest to him sought to tear him down, Ayorinde never wavered in his commitment to his people. His marriage to Christiana reminds us that true power comes not just from military might, but from unity, from forging alliances, even with those who were once enemies. And perhaps most importantly, Ayorinde's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of ambition and betrayal. Even the strongest leaders must be wary of those closest to them, for jealousy, fear, and the hunger for power can destroy even the greatest of empires. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Ayorinde, the warrior king of Tafinia. His story is one of love, betrayal, courage, and legacy, a story that continues to inspire us today. If you enjoyed this story of courage, resilience, and leadership, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next epic tale.